Spider-Man, created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko in 1962, has remained one of the most iconic and beloved superheroes of all time. Over the past 7 decades, the character has evolved significantly, adapting to new storytelling styles, cultural shifts, and world events. This video explores each decade's defining Spider-Man stories, how the character changed, and I'm also going to throw in some stuff to show you how the world outside of comics was changing along with our favourite webhead. And in Ireland, how we determine when the times are changing is usually by what the price of a pint of Guinness is. So let's go. 1960s, the birth of a hero. In the swinging 60s, Peter Parker was unlike any hero before him. He wasn't a billionaire with gadgets or aliens from a different world. He was just a teenager, awkward, broke, and struggling through the pitfalls of adolescence. He worried about his grades, clashed with bullies like Flash Thompson, and tried to balance his social life with his superhero duties. The death of his Uncle Ben haunted him, shaping him into a hero burdened with guilt, yet driven by an unrelenting sense of responsibility. His rogues gallery quickly filled with some of the most memorable villains in comics, from the devious Dr. Octopus to the sinister Green Goblin. But beneath the mask, Peter Parker was still learning how to be a hero, making mistakes along the way, and slowly growing into the man he would eventually become. And just at the end of the decade in 1969, the world held its breath as the Apollo 11 just touched down on our moon's surface. And the price of a pint of Guinness back then went from 8p at the start of the decade up to 16p. I know, crazy, right? 1970s, the era of maturity and loss. The Peter Parker of the 70s was no longer a bright-eyed kid in high school. He had matured, taking on more responsibility, while dealing with devastating personal losses. The death of Gwen Stacy was a turning point for Spider-Man. He had failed, and for the first time, readers saw a superhero who couldn't save the one he loved most. This moment marked a shift in the comics, proving that heroes weren't invincible. As Peter grieved, his relationship with Mary Jane Watson deepened, transitioning from flirtatious banter to something real. The world felt heavier, the villains were more dangerous, and Peter himself more aware of the weight he carried every time he put on the mask. Some defining stories of the era was the night Gwen Stacy died, when the Green Goblin threw her off a bridge, ending her life forever. And surprisingly, she hasn't come back. Obviously if you count Spider-Gwen, but that's a different universe. She's one of the only characters that hasn't come back. And I know she technically has, but like a real life comeback hasn't happened. And Spider-Man No More in 1971, where Peter briefly gives up being Spider-Man, showcasing his internal struggles. And back then, Marvel actually toyed with the idea of sending Spider-Man to Vietnam and the rest of their heroes for some American propaganda because they weren't doing too well with the public. But yeah, a big world event back then was definitely the war. And the price of a pint of Guinness went up to around 32p. It almost doubled. The 1980s. The rise of a darker Spider-Man. The bright optimism of the past was fading, and Spider-Man found himself pulled into more darker, psychological stories. When he donned the black suit, something inside of him changed. He felt stronger, faster, but also more aggressive, more violent. It wasn't just the suit. The world around him was changing, and the innocence of youth had been left behind. His marriage to Mary Jane was a milestone, but even that happiness was overshadowed by threats like Venom, a villain born from his own past mistakes. The friendly neighborhood Spider-Man was being tested like never before, facing horrors both physical and psychological as he navigated this darker phase of his life. The defining stories of the time would be the Black Suit Saga, which lasted about from 1984 to 1985, where Peter gained a sleek alien black suit that enhances his abilities but corrupts his personality. And I think the defining story of the era was Kraven's Last Hunt, a grim psychological story where Kraven the Hunter buries Spider-Man alive and takes his place, ending in such a tragic way that no one would ever predict. And on the outside world, the Berlin Wall was falling, and this marked the end of the Cold War and the reunification of Germany. And the price of a pint is absolutely outrageous, almost doubling again at 70p. 1990s, the era of clones and commercialism. Peter Parker was always defined by identity struggles, but the 1990s pushed that to the extreme. The clone saga threw his entire existence into question. Was he the real Peter Parker, or just another copy? This era was a bit chaotic, filled with larger-than-life battles gruesome new villains like Carnage, and the commercialization of comics that made Spider-Man feel more like a brand than a character. Through it all, Peter remained resilient, fighting not just his enemies, but his own doubts about who he truly was. And the Clone Saga, well, it introduced Ben Reilly as the Scarlet Spider, which is a good thing, I think, but it also made readers not want to read the book anymore. It went on for so long. Another defining story of the era was Maximum Carnage in 1993, where the character of Carnage was introduced, an even more chaotic version of Venom. And one of the main world events back then was the rise of the internet. Nobody, and I mean nobody, could have seen the rise of the World Wide Web and the commercialization of it making way for the new world. And the price of a pint of Guinness is about £1.50 at this point. And yes, it's in pound because back then we didn't have euro. 2000s, a new era of responsibility. Spider-Man had always been Marvel's go-to man, but now he was at the centre of massive, universe-altering events. When he was unmasked during Civil War, the world knew who Peter Parker was, until it cost him everything. He learned that responsibility didn't just mean saving people, it meant making impossible choices, sometimes with painful consequences. The erasure of his marriage to Mary Jane left fans divided, but it returned Spider-Man to a place of struggle, allowing him to once again embody the underdog hero that readers had fallen in love with decades earlier. But in my opinion, I don't think this was a good choice. Readers right now are chomping at the bit just for Peter Parker to be married to Mary Jane, and that shouldn't be a hard thing to give to the fans. But for some reason, Marvel editorial just won't do it. Some defining stories back then were Civil War and Brand New Day. And during 2008, the global financial crisis hit. A severe worldwide economic downturn that reshaped financial policies across the globe. And the price of a pint of Guinness is around $2.50, which is disgraceful, might I add. And finally, the 2010s to the present. The multiverse and legacy. Spider-Man was no longer just Peter Parker. The multiverse exploded, introducing a legacy of heroes like Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen. The idea of Spider-Man had evolved beyond one person. It was now a mantle, an idea that could be carried by anyone. The character had come full circle, proving that what truly made Spider-Man special wasn't just the powers, it was the heart behind the mask. Some defining stories of this era is Spider-Verse, with the introduction of the multiple Spider people from different realities. And yeah, what can I say, the 2010s haven't been good to Spider-Man. They've really let him down. The creators who stood on the shoulders of giants have let them down big time. But I have hope for the future. I really do. And during this time, I don't need to explain what went on, the pandemic, everything like that. And the price of a pint of Guinness right now in Dublin is absolutely disgraceful. It's about £8. £8 What is wrong with the world? In conclusion, throughout the decades, Spider-Man has embodied every stage of life. He started as an insecure teenager struggling with the burdens of adolescence. As he entered adulthood, he faced love, loss, and the weight of responsibility. The tragedies of the past shaped him into a more hardened hero, one who understood that his choices carried consequences. He has been a husband, a mentor, a leader, and at times, a broken man trying to find his way back. As the real world changed, so did Spider-Man. The societal shifts of each era, from political scandals to technological revolutions, found their way into his stories, making him a hero who always felt relevant, always felt real. The introduction of new characters like Miles Morales proved that Spider-Man was never just one person. It was a symbol for anyone who needed to see themselves as a hero. Through every heartbreak, every impossible challenge, Spider-Man endures. He will always be a hero for the next generation to discover, to relate to, and to love, just as the generations before him have. No matter how much the world changes, Spider-Man remains a reminder that with great power comes great responsibility, and that anyone, no matter who they are, can rise up and be something greater. Well everyone, I really hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please let me know in the comments below. These type of videos take a lot of research and a lot of editing. So yeah, if you enjoy my videos, write it in the comments. Doesn't hurt, you know. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Peace.